And welcome to the Startup Innovators podcast. I'm pumped today. We've got Matt Wampler in the house. How you doing, Matt?
Tim, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing really well. Really excited to have you to talk about this exciting business, but more than just the business, kind of how you got to the business. I think for anyone out there that's thinking about starting a company, you're going to be inspired by Matt's story. And the story isn't necessarily the ease in which I just had an idea and went forward. A lot of times, the discovery process of starting a company comes out of mistakes, errors, or just events that are thrust upon you. And that's where some of the greatest ideas happen. Matt, I just want to give a
And
quick,
that's why you've got the House of Pain shirt on today, I assume.
well, I do. The House of Pain says, the full thing says House of Pain, self-made, self-built. And I
There
think
we go.
that's a great, it's actually a gym in St. Louis. I'm kind of a workout freak and I love that. But I thought for entrepreneurs, the greatest ones I've met, some of the best ones I met never even went to college. They are just driven and they no pain, no gain. They take the pain as a learning experience. They figure everything in life is a lesson that I'm going to grow from and I'm going to push through. And that is a very unique mentality. And that's a mentality that I see in some cases being very important. I was listening to Kevin, Mr. Wonderful, which you see all over on the podcast. And someone asked him the question, what percentage of people do you think Americans at least could become entrepreneurs? And he said, it's probably around 30% because only that small group intrinsically has that ability to drive through that pain, drive through some of those issues. And so I think that makes a big difference
Well,
in what we're
I'd
doing.
say you got to drive through the pain, but I think a lot of people can drive through the pain. It's how do you
Yeah.
enjoy the process of going through it? Because there's never an end. Every time you succeed at something, it's just a new set of problems that you have to overcome. So it's like, how do you find joy in the process?
I think you can say that about everything in life. Being a parent, being a spouse. I know you have little kids. Well, let's take a little bit from the beginning. And we talked a little bit about how you grew up in Champaign, Urbana, Illinois, which is where I also went to school, ironically. And then you headed out to DC. And I guess you started out wanting to own restaurants and you started with Jimmy John's, I believe. You're trying to get into that world. And that's where you kind of went through this process and eventually discovered this idea for bringing AI software to restaurants. So love to get your background on it. What inspired you? Where did that big idea come from? And let's go from there.
Well, Tim, I wish I could say that my first entrepreneurial journey was really well thought out, but it was thought out by a 21-year-old kid. So it was not always made but the best decisions. Some guy had run his Jimmy John's franchise into the ground, and all the smart money of the franchisees said, I don't want to buy that train wreck. And so they let some 21-year-old kid with, dreams of owning a business, myself, buy them. And so, I kind of found out the hard way how to run a business and walked in on day one to a restaurant with no air conditioning, ice buckets on top of the cold table compressors, 4 employees. I remember
Oh my
walking in
gosh.
that first morning and just getting hit with the smell of the grease trap and thinking, man, like, all right, I got to make this work or it's bankruptcy. And yeah, that's kind of how I got into the entrepreneurial world.
That reminds me of Restaurant Impossible, a show that
Yeah.
I love watching, the transformations of something terrible to that. But I think for a lot of entrepreneurs in the restaurant business, that echoes very true, that
Yeah.
show.
I could have used that advice.
Well, it is available on YouTube in the future. So you take over this Jimmy John's. You're basically, I mean, you're an adult, but you're really a kid in terms of experience. Um, maybe I think you're old enough that you could have a beer after a hard day if you really wanted one.
Exactly.
Y- And so, what happened with that? Why not just continue to scale up, open more restaurants, buy more Jimmy John's, and become, a full-fledged restaurateur? What happened that changed kind of your path?
Well, first off, I did. So I ended
Mhm.
up turning it around, took it from doing 400,000 to 1.2 million over the next 18 months, opened up 4
Wow.
more restaurants over the next,
Wow.
half decade. And the thing that made me successful in Jimmy John's was the fact that Jimmy John's gave us a playbook. Follow these systems and procedures. Your job is just to come in and execute day in and day out. because, I wasn't a restaurateur. I didn't know how to run a restaurant, but they gave me the playbook. So my job was execution.
Yeah.
And you slowly found that, you find as you grow in your career, what are the things that really are fulfilling, give you passion. Things that
Hmm.
I loved were the things that weren't in the playbook. That 2% where, you needed the creative problem solving to figure out. Like I thrived in that. And, I started to have kids. Restaurants is 100 hours a week.
Yeah.
Everything bad happens at 2 a.m. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go back to grad school and, go see if I can find something where instead of 98% of my time just being straight execution, is more about creative problem solving.
So I know you went back to get your MBA, and did that change your perspective on the type of business that you wanted to run?
Yeah, it really did. I mean, coming from the restaurant industry, like I lived within my four walls. And so,
Yeah.
you kind of broaden your perspective and kind of realize, hey, I got a couple hundred employees and was running a multi-million-dollar business. And we ran the entire thing on Excel spreadsheets and guessing. Like Jimmy John's isn't a small brand, it's a multi-billion-dollar organization. You know, if this is how this industry runs, there's so many ways to improve it. And so I got into coding, I got into, data science and was blown away with where technology was today. And so I called my now co-founder, Osa, who I give a lot of credit. And we went and talked to maybe 50 restaurant brands and just kept asking them what they needed. And they'd answer and we'd say, why do you need that? And they'd answer again, keep asking why. And basically every time the restaurant would come down to the same core problem. I don't know who's going to walk in the door tomorrow because I don't know who's going to walk in the door. I make inefficient decisions around what to prep, what to order, who to staff. We said that is a core pain point that we can solve. So we started out as a predictive analytics company doing sales forecasting and predictive prep, and have slowly become this back of house AI operations management, almost decision management for your organization. How do I give you the right answers ahead of time so that more days go right?
Was now when this happened, where were we in terms of the pandemic? Was this post-pandemic, during pandemic? Because that kind of rifled through, particularly with the restaurant business, changed everything. I'd love to know forecasting during a pandemic.
No, we were coming out of the pandemic. So I got
Yeah,
into the whole programming data science thing during the pandemic in my free time. And,
yeah.
it slowly snowballed from there.
So the timing was actually good. It gave you an opportunity to sit down, learn how to code, think about the problems, and actually probably talk to people, right? We knew we would come out of it at some point, and then you had that dialogue going.
Well, and you find, especially in these legacy industries, that there's not a lot of innovative thinking. And when you ran into the pandemic, it forced everybody to re-examine what is our brand? What do we need to bring in? And the companies that had been more tech forward, that were already doing online ordering and third-party delivery, like they were the ones that thrived. So you had this kind of ecosystem of restaurants that were now trying to think, how can I innovate and make my model better? So it's this interesting time, especially since sales weren't like they changed so drastically out of the pandemic. Everything had become more complex. It was just the right timing, and the technology happened to, kind of intersect with it as well.
Now, were you guys looking at large enterprises or kind of starting with mom and pop restaurants?
Tim, we were looking for anybody that would return our call, anybody with a pulse. I mean, I think the first restaurant we worked with was my cousin's Jimmy John's, and
Oh my
it was
gosh.
just trying to figure out how much bread. These are like really practical problems, by the way.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not this whole big complicated AI thing. You know, I had 5 Jimmy John's. I mean, every night I had 5 assistant managers that had to decide, do I need to bake another cycle of process was to stick your head out the door. Was it raining out? Are there lines at the bars? Like, does it look busy? And then they would come make a gut feel decision. Our first problem we solved was, can we just tell this store based on all their POS transaction data and the weather and events, you know, the magic number for you today is 18 sticks. 2 hours prior to close, you don't have 18 sticks, bake some more. And so like,
Yeah.
we started these simple problems and, it's amazing. You get those right and it ultimately adds up to whether the restaurant's profitable.
Yeah, it seems like you would first of all, I would not think that, a Jimmy John's would be so disorganized and the way you're talking about it from store to store. You would think whether it's a privately owned enterprise like an In-N-Out or it's a franchise situation, like some of the large fast food chains, you think they would have massive amounts of data. They've been in business for so many years that would be a great starting point versus, let's say, a mom and pop who is a family-run restaurant who maybe just be running more off the cuff based on local clients, local history, and they don't have a lot of data. So it's so fascinating that you started off with even
Well,
the large companies had
it's
issues.
funny you should say that. We actually
Yeah.
found to be a little bit opposite.
Really?
So
Okay.
the mom and pop, you've got that owner operator that's living in the store. They really do have a feel of the pulse and they've been doing it for a decade, right? And they
Yeah.
care so much. They tend to get it right. Maybe it is a gut feel. And I'm sure there's ways you can improve it. But if you're trying to run 50 of this franchised location, and I've got hourly staff that don't care as much running the night shift. Those ones need the most help. And you'd think, well, of course, the big brand is going to provide all that intelligence, but you come to learn pretty quickly in this industry, you know, these brands live on royalties. It's a cut of top line revenue. 'Cause,
Yeah.
they're investing in everything to boost sales, but fundamentally, they're kind of like letting the franchisees manage those decisions that affect the bottom line.
I would think is that mom and pop, family-owned places, they can act quickly. That I think would be a difference. When you're going out today, let's talk about where you guys are today. So let's talk about, first of all, like, what is the secret sauce? There's all kinds of systems and software that are out that are working with restaurants from POS to everything on the face of this earth. What is it that you're doing that is so distinctly different than maybe other players out there?
So I'd say fundamentally, we're answering questions. We live in a world of dashboards and analytics. Restaurants don't live in that world. They need you to close the gap and answer a question. You at this store, 18 sticks of bread 2 hours prior to close. For the barbecue place, you need to have 12 briskets smoking tonight for tomorrow. That's the optimal amount, right? And you laugh, but like that is the difference between a thriving business and one that goes out of business. It's the one that gets those little questions right every day because it adds up to my cost of goods sold or a loss in revenue. Uh,
Yeah, I smile because I see it as such a difficult thing personally. I have thought about this question. I can't tell you, probably 75% of the time I'm out with my kids at a restaurant. I've actually told them at dinner, I wonder how they know how to stock how to stock their environment with all the ingredients that they need to deliver this. Because you go to a restaurant, you're like, oh my God, I got to order that now because they're probably going to be out of it in another 10 minutes. And you look around and like the restaurant isn't very large. There's not a lot of storage space and it's not super organized. And I'm thinking, how do they possibly make these decisions so that I come in and want that special? It's always available for me. I've had this discussion. My kids it drives them crazy because I think this way. And that's why I'm smiling because, wow, if you could actually predict you need 18 breadsticks on Tuesday night from Wednesday morning because something's happening on Wednesday, pretty
Tim,
amazing.
so my co-founder Osa, he's your
Yeah.
programmer's programmer, Silicon Valley think tank. He's done all that. It took me 6 months to convince him that this was a problem because he's like, Matt, we're landing autonomous rockets on aircraft carriers and cars are driving themselves. We're putting computer chips in people's brains. This problem of how many briskets to smoke tomorrow, like somebody has thought about this. They're not wasting hundreds of billions of dollars a year for no reason. Uh,
Yeah.
and it's funny, we'd have these conversations, and more they just kept answering that it didn't exist. And I remember the light bulb finally, like the straw that broke the camel's back. He walked into a donut place and he pulled the GM aside and he was just like, do you have a system for how many donuts to bake? He's like, yeah, of course we do. He's like, oh, I knew it. There had to be a system. The system was, after like a year or two, you just slowly start to get a feel for it. You
Yeah.
get your finger on the pulse of the operation. He's just like, I guess this is really an issue. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I could see, you get the feel for a location or 2, but can you get the feel for 50 locations that are
So
very
that
diverse states? Now it becomes harder and you're the owner. Now
yeah,
feeling kind of falls away, right? And data and analytics comes into play.
well, and you're just relying on a lot of people, which makes sense. The restaurants is the
Yeah,
people business. It's people managing people, serving people, and usually their answer to most questions is not technology, but how do we throw more people at it? But, fundamentally, that's where the whole AI thing came in. You know, most of these restaurant chains, their data's in the same order, their operations are the same. The biggest problem we have, frankly, is that the data is incredibly messy. So like 60% of what we're doing is data cleansing and backfilling
yeah,
the data and standardizing it, right?
yeah,
But then, the AI comes in there because like we can all of a sudden go on a location by location, item by item and figure out, how does rain affect this menu item? How does the day of the week? How does your
mm,
marketing and promotions? How does your
yeah,
limited time offering? And do it at scale and do it for decisions that may be 5 or $10.
yeah, yeah. No, we had a client once that was doing something similar. They were looking at devices like temperature gauges and things like
Yeah.
that, weather predictors, pulling that together because they could tell if the weather dropped from like, let's say from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. dramatically, and then some rain came in, they would know that the coffee shop will have an increase in volume because people are going to want to linger on a cold day in a coffee shop. Like that level, and it also incorporated human psychology with data too. I was so fascinated about this merging between data analytics and the actual technologies that are measuring things. And that's where we're going to, from wearables to the ring systems, and you can control everything from lighting to temperatures to your homes. So I would think that that data is going to make a big impact on restauranting as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the world we look at is one where no one gets into restaurants because they love data and inventory and invoices, like the metric stuff. It's hospitality. You get into it for the people and your team and your customers, creating those magical memories. Like that's the business. And,
Yeah,
I don't think AI is ever going to come in and create those magical memories for your customers, but it's
yeah.
really good at the numbers and the routines. And the more that we can automate that and optimize that for a restaurant so that they can, focus on the people side of the business,
Yeah.
it's just a win for the industry.
Matt, I feel your passion for this, not because it's a technology company, because you as someone who came out of the restaurant business. I mean, I really feel that passion coming forward, that understanding of the visceral problems, and where the restaurateur or the owner wants to be, right? Like you just said, creating a wonderful experience, sharing new food. So many of them had dreams of owning restaurants. I've had friends where their parents invested money because their son's dream was to go to school and be a chef and start an Italian restaurant somewhere. Like we're all Italian, right? Start an Italian restaurant, and there's so much that goes into that. And so I feel that passion coming forward, and I really wonder if you would have been as successful as you have been so early on right now if you didn't have those experiences and really understand the ups and downs at a visceral level.
It's an interesting question. So, yes and no. I mean, the yes side of it is having empathy for your customer and caring. That matters, and I think that
Yeah.
matters in any business or segment. Um, I think, sometimes we get too close to the product. I as an ex, owner, operator, restaurant guy, I would have gone about solving this problem very differently than a product person. And
Hmm.
my co-founder would have gone about it very differently than I would have from a technology standpoint. I think that, having both heads together, that yin and yang, the right brain, left brain, helped us arrive at that final destination. I'll give you a really good example. We support the
Sure.
vast majority of our restaurants via email. Like, talk
Really?
about high-tech AI. We're delivering a lot of these reports via email, partially because I didn't want to do that. I wanted fancy dashboards like, we're an AI company. Let's do all this. My co-founder's a product guy. He's like, this is the simplest, way to get the information across as straightforward as possibly that works in their current workflows. Like this is the logical product thing to do. And we will see if the customers demand something else. And it turned out they actually really liked it. And it became kind of a differentiator. I don't have to have a login. I don't have to have another dashboard. You're just giving me the answers I need each day. I wouldn't have
Yeah.
come up with that.
Wow. Yeah. You would think that it'd be like, okay, we got to get a mobile app and it's got to
Yeah.
be better than every other mobile app. And then you've got 20,000 mobile apps on your phone and you've got to learn another one. I can totally see that. And you're getting up trying to run a restaurant. You just want to make sure you've got enough inventory to produce the food and take care of the clients because one bad experience can sometimes kill a customer forever. Really, that's the one thing about restaurants is you can enjoy it all the time. You have a terrible experience just one time out of 20, and you don't go back. You try something else. So that is really interesting.
Probably the hardest thing about this job is knowing that, we're sending out thousands of these a day and that each one of these numbers, tens of thousands of numbers, if we get wrong, is a really bad day for somebody.
Yeah,
There's that
yeah.
server that has to go tell the, children that there's no mac and cheese. Like that's a horrible moment. And yeah, it's the only downside, but we get them right and you change their life. So
Well, we've all had that experience where we can't wait to go to our favorite restaurant. We go there because there's one dish that we always get, we love. We go there, we're there, the family's there, and we're out of that tonight. We ran out or we couldn't do it. And so, yeah, I understand that.
I challenge anybody listening to this, like start paying attention. You'll be amazed how often restaurants are out of product.
That's a bit, yeah, so often. So look, let's jump real quickly to some details about the business. So if there's an investor that's watching this, potential partner, that they learn a little bit more. So you've raised, I believe, close to 3.8 to 4 million in an institutional round. Was that a seed or an A round? And
Indeed.
how a seed round? Okay, great. And how long is that going to carry you forward? Do you believe?
I think that one of the learnings coming as a company that was, created in the downturn for fundraising,
Hmm.
we'd like to make fundraising optional, not mandatory. So
Yeah.
this should take us to spitting distance to cash flow break even. So we
Wow.
could run indefinitely. I don't think
I
that's
love
the
that.
direction that we're going. We've got a first mover advantage right now. It's, think this is a $160 billion a year problem in just the US. So like we're going to double down. We're going to raise an A probably mid to late next year,
Okay,
2026.
great.
And so like, yeah, it's exciting.
And how many employees do you guys have right now?
11 full time.
11 full time. In terms of customers, what does that topography kind of look like? Is it some large chains, some franchises, a lot of mom and pops?
Yeah,
How is it
fast
today?
casual QSR chains, think more business driven than chef inspired.
Okay,
We're integrated with, like if you walk into a restaurant, there's a 70% chance we're already integrated with their POS system.
really?
Typically, you're looking at like regional chains to national chains, greater than
Wow.
15 or 20 units to, you know, go to largest is 350 locations.
That are deploying your technology already. Wow. Does it typically start off with like we're going to do a pilot test? We're going to test 10 restaurants and then slowly roll it out over time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is trust. Obviously, if you're doing something really important with their operations that could cause
Hmm.
things to go wrong, they want to validate it. And they've been burned by technology so many times that it's honestly something we look forward to doing the pilots because you know you, the bar is low. It's easy to exceed.
Yeah. So when you walk into the door, what type of resistance do you get? Is it just is it technology resistance? Is it like you said, if you're integrating with other aspects of our business that could have this kind of a colliding effect? Is it just general resistance? Period. Like what? It sounds so great. If someone could say, "Hey, I could show you a way to predict exactly what you're going to need, so you never run out of X." It sounds wonderful, but where's the rub when you go in to try to make the pitch, and how do you
Look, I
overcome
mean,
that?
pride. So if that person at the donut shop that says after a few years, you get the feel. They say that with pride. They
Yeah.
earned. I mean, that's learned
Well,
intelligence.
it's an art, right? That's the art of the business.
Yeah.
And art can't be replicated. It's a one person thing, the artist.
The amount of pride that a restaurant general manager has in their business, they view it as their business, and
Yeah.
nobody knows it like me. And so there's this trust aspect and pride that's all, emotionally mixed in. But we find usually they look at it skeptically for a week, and then the next week they get busy, and then at some point they just use the numbers and they find that it works really well, and then it's just part of their life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Do you find that the resistance is the same between like a family restaurant and a larger chain? Because now you're dealing with, like you said, the pride of an owner versus maybe someone who's heading operations or a CTO or, the big companies, it's usually a team of people that are kind of above the fray a little bit managing things.
Well, I think it goes back to what I was talking about with Jimmy John's providing me the playbook. My job is
Yeah.
to execute.
Yeah.
As a franchised organization, or a large chain, I'm used to getting support and following systems and procedures, right? And so it's much easier for us to, integrate into those workflows with an organization that's trained to execute than it is for the artist that, this is their passion project, right? They're much less likely to want to trust the, AI bean counters.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. What about employees? So, how are people attracted to your company right now? Is it kind of word of mouth? Are you for going out there and looking for people? Is it people within the community hears about this new technology and say, "Well, this is really something different going on. I love this space." How have people kind of come to hear your message and join your
Well,
company?
Tim, I'm hoping I get like what, 20, 30 warm inbound leads just from this conversation alone.
Well, that would be wonderful.
No, I mean, look, hey, we live in a digital society. We lean very heavily into the social media side of things. Frankly, this is a new category. It's kind of shocking. This just doesn't really exist in restaurants. So it's more letting people know that there's, awareness that there's a solution out there. So look,
Yeah.
we go on podcasts. Yeah, I host the Restaurant AI podcast. I want to shout to the world that this is out there and that your life can be better. But outside of that, it's everything a normal business does: SEO, GEO, trade shows, account-based
Cold email.
marketing. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're always looking for better ways to reach our target demographic, and part of running the seed round is we know the technology works, we know we can satisfy customers. How do we create that repeatable system of being able to put in $1 and generate three more dollars of revenue, is it, before we raise our A.
Tell me about the toast deal that you did and how that's working for you guys.
Oh, I mean, it's great. Look, it's a kind of a passion project for me. Obviously, we can't go into every independent restaurant and build an AI operations system, bespoke for their brand. The
Yeah.
big guys we can, but we've learned so much along the way working with these brands that we've been able to productize it into a semi one size fits all, product for the SMB customer, the independent restaurant out there. And so today we have a free offering on Toast. You want sales forecasting for your restaurant? Great, go for it. And we're going to go give you a bunch of helpful reports along the way to help you out. And we hope that your restaurant brand grows. And we hope that as you grow and you open more units, you look to us to help support that growth. It's one of our ways of giving back to the community and,
Wow.
hopefully helping build relationships with, successful restaurant brands.
That's amazing. So look, let's talk just real quickly before we wrap it up. I'm what's the kind of next big milestone for you? If you had to say, here's two or three things that we want to make within the next 2 or 3 years, are going to fundamentally change this company. What are those kind of big goals going to be for you guys?
Well, there's the sexy and the unsexy. So, uh, a lot of restaurant technology is just like a utility. It's all historic descriptive numbers. This is what happened last week. An
Yeah.
order came up and it's now in my kitchen display system. But none of these are smart technologies. None of them are proactive. None of them are future looking. So I think that you probably won't realize this, but ClearCOGS is beginning to work with a lot of these companies to enable that smart system, to inject the predictive analytics into these already existing workflows and improve them. And then, so like that's the unsexy thing that keeps the world moving. And then, on top of that, maybe we just registered the trademark for the restaurant copilot. We're building that fractional CFO, COO that sits on top of all of your data, does the number crunching, lets you know you're running out of chicken at this location, you've got excess at this location. If you want to make a transfer, hours ahead of time instead of waiting to the last possible second. There's a million different ways with which we can make the lives easier for restaurant operators.
Well, it sounds absolutely incredible. It's a huge market, and so we want to wish you a lot of luck in it to continue forward as well. And where can people find out more information about? I mean, you've got your website, you've got, is it LinkedIn you like to be reached out? Let's talk about where you go for the podcast, because I think that's really exciting too. If you are in the restaurant business, the hospitality space, and you really want to get kind of an inside view on what's going on, in addition to this podcast, Matt's got his own podcast. It's very focused where they go into detail with a lot of the kind of personal experiences of what's worked, what hasn't worked, and where value has been delivered. And you can hear it from some of the owners themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're living in interesting times, to say the least. You've
For
got one of the
sure.
biggest macro technology changes that's happened in a generation in AI coming through. We're really covering it in the restaurant sector. It's the Restaurant AI podcast, by the way. Very
Yeah.
creative name there. But
I love it.
let's take the perspective of the technology people that are building the technology, the restaurant peoples that are using the technology, and the venture capitalists that are funding the innovation. And, how do each of them think about what's happening today and just following the arc? So, yeah, anywhere that you listen to your podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, we're on there, Restaurant AI Podcast. Find us at clearcogs.com. We love LinkedIn, any of your social media. We're there. We love talking with restaurants. Happy to talk with venture capitalists as well.
Well, that's awesome. And so anyone who wants to reach out, you've got the information on Matt. I'll put it in the show notes. And of course, if you need more information, reach out to me personally. Happy to make an introduction to Matt if we think it's appropriate. So Matt, thanks so much for joining us today. It's really been an honor.
Hey, Tim, I appreciate you making the time and highlighting our cause.
Thank you so much, Matt. Appreciate it. Cheers. The Startup Innovators podcast is provided by MatchStar Venture Search. If you are interested in any of our executive roles or need help sourcing world-class talent for your company, check out our website at matchstar.com.